Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship Podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined, as always, by my esteemed colleague and proud Tampa Catholic graduate, the one and only Eric Henry. It is the start of SEC play, kids. This is it. 4 years ago, summer of 2021, 3 years ago, we learned that Texas and Oklahoma were headed to the SEC. Actually, they were supposed to join in 2025, Eric, but
that's correct.
Texas wheeled and dealed. They gave up that Michigan home game and switched it so that Fox would be happy. And so Texas went to Michigan this year to make Fox happy. And now the Longhorns, the number one team in college football in the AP poll, are getting ready for SEC play, and the SEC has given them Mississippi State to open SEC play, and they get to open it at home, Eric. Everyone's looking at Texas going, man, how many steak dinners did Texas buy Greg Sankey or the schedulers over there at the SEC to get this nice pillow soft start? To get Mississippi State on the schedule September 28th, Eric. Jeff Lebby, who last year was at Oklahoma running the number 4 scoring offense in college football, 41.7 points per game, beat Texas at Oklahoma with Dylan Gabriel at quarterback. Wonder if the Sooners are wishing they still had Dylan Gabriel at quarterback, Eric. But Jeff Lebby off to a rough start, 1-3. Got trounced by Toledo in Starkville and then got beat up by Billy Napier's Florida Gators. Eric, your thoughts?
Well, Chip, I won't lie. Little trip to Stark Vegas might have been nice. Nevertheless, listen, anytime I get to remain at home, not hop on a plane, I am grateful. So I will thank the SEC schedule makers, and I'll buy them a steak dinner for the fact that we only have to get on a plane, I guess now twice, for the rest of the year heading to Vandy and Arkansas. That aside, another episode of the Flagship Podcast. Always a pleasure and an honor to be on with my esteemed colleague, Chip Brown. In terms of Mississippi State, we'll dive into things with them, and it's no secret that they're a rebuild. But I'm not too shocked. Toledo, damn good G5 program. You take a look at what they've been over the past few years. Not too much of a shock there. Jeff Lebby's offense is one that you always have to account for. And of course, it is a descendant. I don't know what the right phrasing would be, but it's the Art Briles offense, right? It's kind of, of course, Lebby's Art Briles' son-in-law, so certainly that. But of course, he was on Baylor's coaching staff for 8 years, right? So you know what you're getting, and I think that helps Texas in the sense that they're familiar with some of the concepts, whether it's from the fact that so many teams now, Chip, run little facets of that offense. Maybe not things as far as the wide splits and maybe the tempo, but just variations of that Art Briles offense have kind of matriculated across college football. And also, Jeff Lebby was Oklahoma's offensive coordinator for 2 years, right? So, certainly the Texas secondary, Texas defense as a whole, are going to be familiar with what they're going to be facing on Saturday. I think Mississippi State's fortunes or chances certainly lessen with Blake Shapen being out for the rest of the season. That certainly puts a damper, a hole in their quarterback situation. So we'll have some talented guys at receiver, but all in all, and listen, we're at SEC Media Days defensively, don't really have a ton of guys that are going to scare you or threaten you. And in my mind, Chip, this is a for lack of a better phrase, a continuation of Texas's non-conference schedule outside of Michigan. And even we've seen with Michigan, not quite the Michigan of last year with all the losses they've had. So certainly a nice way for Texas to open the SEC slate and to quickly touch on, which you kind of alluded to, and we won't, belabor this point too much. We can probably get on that come OU week, but there are a lot of teams that should be kicking themselves for letting Dillon Gabriel walk out the door. I know of one. I won't say who it is. It might be an alma mater of one of the hosts of this illustrious podcast. But Dillon Gabriel, you talk about gets no respect, Chip. And obviously Brent Venables made some comments today as we're taping this on Wednesday, September 24th. My apologies. I'm a week behind. Brent Venables made some comments in regards to, his recollection of Dillon Gabriel wanting to leave. I'll say this, again, we won't make this the OU podcast. I think if you really wanted Dillon Gabriel back, you would have found a way to keep him in Norman, Chip. That's just my perspective. But that could be for another time. The Sooners certainly struggling, but nevertheless, yes, it is a exciting week here on the 40 acres and a lot to dive into in terms of Mississippi State and really, projecting forward is to pass Mississippi State. Again, we're not overlooking them. The team isn't, but once you get past that week, you got a bye week and then the toughest stretch of Texas's schedule with OU and Georgia back-to-back weeks.
Yeah, and if Brent Venables, Seth Luttrell don't handle that Jackson Arnold situation just right, because Michael Hawkins is looking like he could be the guy at quarterback for OU. Jackson Arnold might be getting a phone call from Jeff Levy saying, "Hey, come on down. We can get it done." Jackson Arnold, of course, committed and signed with Oklahoma when Jeff Levy was the offensive coordinator there. Okay, so you mentioned Blake Shapen will not be the quarterback for Mississippi State. He is out for the year. And so they are cobbling whatever offense they can together there. Mississippi State, the wide splits, the tempo offense. They want to try and spread that defense out as much as possible to see if the box is getting full or getting light. And so they know whether to, hand off or pull and make that quick pass a la Art Briles. And Texas has a quarterback question this week as well, Eric. Steve Sarkisian saying on Monday that Quinn Ewers would be questionable again if he had to put out an injury report on Monday. Now, we know there will be an injury report this week. It'll come out on Wednesday. I'm hearing that if Steve Sarkisian is not just feeling, if he's not feeling 100% confident about Quinn Ewers and the possibility of him aggravating that oblique strain, that he will hold Quinn for another week. Now, the source I talked to said 50-50. We don't know as we speak if Quinn will be on the field for the Longhorns. I've been told he wants to be. He wants to be back on the field as soon as possible. This is his, in his mind, his last year of college football. He wants to have the season, as much of the season as he can have now that he's missed a game. And obviously he was the Heisman Trophy front runner. And we talked a little bit last week. I thought this was, or maybe Steve Sarkisian said this last Thursday. So we did not talk about this. And this is a good thing to talk about because Steve Sarkisian said the three things that are still out there for Quinn Ewers: winning a national championship, going to New York for the Heisman, and being a top 5 NFL draft pick next April, are all still there for Quinn Ewers. I thought that was not only an emphatic endorsement of Quinn Ewers, because remember, we're coming off the radical Arch Madness performance against UTSA when the guy was slinging touchdowns all over the place, running for a 67-yard touchdown, and people were like, "Oh my God, he's so much better than Quinn Ewers." And then they saw the redshirt freshman growing pains against ULM. And everybody was like, oh, yeah, okay, Quinn Ewers, yeah, he's pretty good. He did go to Alabama and win, and he did go to Michigan and win. So what did you make of those comments from Steve Sarkisian about Quinn Ewers last Thursday, Eric?
Chip, I don't want to throw cold water over this, but I didn't make too much of it because let's just be honest, and I wrote about it on 4 Downs, talked about it last week about Quinn deserving more respect from the national media. If there anyone out there I'll rephrase that. If there's anyone out there locally.
Careful. Fan is short for fanatic.
There you go. Anyone out there locally who's been around Steve Sarkisian. I'm not just talking about media. I mean, people who live and die and breathe every Sark press conference and every Sark interview. And he emphasized how obsessed he was with winning a national title. Chip, is there anyone out there who really thought that he would turn those
hopes and dreams
of that team over to a redshirt freshman with 1 start based off his performance and a half against UTSA? That just doesn't make any sense. I mean, I hate to be so flippant about it, but we're not talking about Caleb Williams. I hate to bring up a sore memory, coming in and doing it, in one of the biggest, most spotlight atmospheres in college football. We're talking about a home game against UTSA, in which it's clear UTSA is not. I mean, we're not even talking about a UTSA program from a couple of years ago that was a G5, top 5 G5 team. We're talking about a UTSA team that's struggling. So that just never made any sense to me. If I truly were to try to read into those comments, it's what to be honest, I felt like those of us already knew that these two are tied together. Steve Sarkisian sees his national championship hopes and chances tied together with Quinn Ewers' health and Quinn Ewers' performance. And if you didn't gather that, Chip, from the comments he made on Thursday, you gather that from what he said during Monday's availability in terms of it's in the best interest of not just Quinn Ewers, but the UT program for Quinn to be honest and open with his health status for this week in terms of not rushing him back. And I know we'll talk later on the podcast about whether we would believe that Quinn should start, whether he will start, and if he should start if he's not 100%. We talked about that in the Take Two column. But again, I'm not trying to throw cold water over this. I just don't quite understand. I'll say it here on the podcast. This is not, please emphasizing this. This is not taking anything away from Arch Manning, the talent he is, and he earned every bit of that 5-star ranking. You see the deep ball, you see his athleticism, you see the potential. It is clear why he was the number 1 overall recruit in his class. However, I'm going to say this again. I'm going to say this very carefully and say these words very clearly. If this were another team in America that had a quarterback who was performing the way Quinn Ewers was prior to the injury and had another redshirt freshman, even one as talented as Arch Manning with the 5-star label and 5-star billing, come in and perform that way for a half against UTSA, that quarterback's job, the starting quarterback's job, would not be in danger. The only reason this is a conversation amongst the people outside of Austin is because of Arch's last name. And that's not saying, again, saying this clearly, that Arch is a product of his last name. He's not. Damn good quarterback. Certainly a highly talented prospect. I'm saying the conversation that we're having right now is a byproduct of what comes with him being a part of football's royal family. And there's nothing wrong with him being part of football's royal family at all, right? It's just this conversation is just, it's one that really is nonsensical. So that is what I made of Steve's comments. That's what I made of kind of, his comments, not only last week, but this week, and just the conversation as a whole.
I just liked the boldness of those statements. Okay. Playing for a national championship, just putting it out there. And, he said, with the games we have left, I think, Quinn has a great chance of being in New York and then a top 5 NFL draft pick. I love all that because that is it exudes confidence. It reminds Quinn Ewers that, hey, I'm hurting right now. I'm hurting. I didn't want to be injured this year. I wanted to show everyone I could be healthy. That's another reason he wants to get back so fast. That, I'm tough. I'm durable. I can do this. And to hear my coach put all that out there, I think is great. And it does silence the uninformed noise, the casual observers who are like, quarterback controversy, Manning, Arch Madness, and so Steve just went whoop, just turned off all the sound on that with those.
And Chip, really quick, that's how you do it. That's how you do it. That's how you don't let that thing linger. There you go.
Right, you make an emphatic statement. So, all right, good stuff there. We obviously did a recap of the game, so we don't need to go into the details of the pounding that ULM received from the Longhorns, but the fact that Trey Wisner did not play, and we don't know quite where he is with his injury, that running back room keeps getting thinner, Eric. I mean, you've obviously had a nice performance from Jaden Blue, 25 carries, 124 yards, 3 touchdowns rushing, 1 touchdown receiving. You're like, okay, great. Jaden Blue revealed to us this week the most carries he had in a high school game he thought was 23. So that was a career best or career high for Jaden Blue, who's showing, hey man, I can run between the tackles. I can get it done for you. I'm not just a receiver. I'm not just a perimeter guy. What do you make of the Jaden Blue performance? And of course, the Pro Football Focus grades are out, and Jarek Gibson has a 9.6 pass blocking rating. Does that mean Jaden Blue's going to get another 25 carry game against Mississippi State this Saturday?
Chip, I want to start really quick with Trey because Steve revealed in the post game, I guess Trey was dealing with a bit of a hamstring
hamstring.
Yeah. So, those can be tricky, especially with backs, right? So we'll see what happens there. Yeah, the Jaden thing, I thought, is the reason I asked him at post game, and I asked him it again during the week. Just the mentality, right? I mean, and listen, we're talking about a young guy, someone who, doesn't have a ton of tread on his tires because he's a junior in class, but obviously doesn't have a ton of game experience in his collegiate career, and obviously chose to forego his senior year of high school. So it doesn't have a ton of tread on his tires, but you can flip that, Chip. And while you may not have a ton of tread on your tires, you got to get used to taking 20-something carries or 20-something touches in general in a game, right? And Jaden responded well. He said it's why he wanted to bulk up in the offseason. He also said mentally, he kind of, worked on himself in the offseason with Tashard Choice to be able to handle that workload. But to your point, it doesn't mean that the running back room isn't getting thinner by the day. We didn't see Velton Gardner on Saturday, so straight to Colin Page, right? And that was kind of the question that we were working around in the offseason is do you bring in a Velton Gardner? Steve Sarkisian said, yeah, the reason he brought someone in like that is just because if you lose another pack, you don't want to have to be in a situation where you don't have someone with a lot of experience. And Velton Gardner was available. He turned it a free agent pickup, so to speak, right? So, yeah, it certainly is something because now with Trey Wisner, again, Contravian prefers Contravian, now down to 2 scholarship backs. It's just a very interesting situation. I don't think Nick Sanders is in a position to be someone who could take a carry in an SEC game. We can make the argument that Colin Page is probably the bare minimum, right? Or I guess not bare minimum, but the furthest you want to go, because someone who's been in the program has been coached up by Tashard Choice for a few years, but that's the furthest you want to go as far as getting someone to carry. Ryan Niblett, tell you that much, I'm liking what he's showing, right? Again, still an inexperienced player, but someone who, Chip, in my mind, okay, if you need to take some of the workload off of Quintravion, give a carry here or there, I think you can work him in. To your question about Jarrett Gibson and the PFF pass grade, I don't mean anything with disrespect to PFF because we use their numbers and we value the way they do things. And I think especially at the power level where those games are on TV, you get a much better look. Although I will say this, Chip, as someone who covered a lot of Group of 5 football, and my friend Chip Brown had his first experience with the E+ broadcast. And I don't want to speak for him, but I think he's not looking forward to any more of those in his career. Chip, the people from PFF, they're using that same broadcast. I'm just saying, I've seen a lot of unique PFF grades from games that were on E+ broadcasts. Just take it with a grain of salt. That's all I'll say. I would probably be interested in asking Steve Sarkisian on Thursday what he made, not necessarily of the PFF grade, but Jarrett's ability, or maybe not Jarrett's ability, because we know he's going to say that he can do it, right? That's a prerequisite in the offense. But what he made of Jarrett's performance in pass pro on Thursday, and I would read more into that as opposed to a 9.6. Just because, Chip, when you start getting those super low grades, it's like, you see the 40s and 50s and 60s, and that you can kind of make sense of. When you start seeing a 9.6, you're either saying that someone completely missed a block or they allowed a sack. And to my eye, I didn't see either, but I have not seen a replay of the game. And because it was on E+, I probably never will see a replay of that game because if you ever tried to get a replay of an E+ game, they're not that easy to access.
Yeah, I mean, it's a concern. It's a concern because Quintravion Wisner doesn't have the best pass blocking rating, but Colin Page, baby, has got a 70 when it comes to pass blocking. So Trojan man, more love for Colin Page, who ran 10 times for 60 yards last week in the ULM game. Of course, proud Austin Anderson graduate. And hey, man,
in Chip Brown's backyard, baby.
That's right. That's right. For the record, Colin Page has 16 carries for 92 yards. That is 5.8 yards per carry. Other than Ryan Wingo, who has a 55 yards per carry average. He had the reverse against Michigan. And Isaiah Bond, who has a 25 yard per carry average. Let's just say among the running backs, Colin Page has got the highest yards per carry average. Shout out to Trojan man. All right, enough of that. Eric, what would be your greatest concern right now? We know that this Texas team has a lot of things to like. The red zone offense is on fire. You got the best quarterback room in college football. You've got an offensive line that is, contending for the Joe Moore Award. You got a defensive line that's containing opposing rushing attacks. You got linebackers who fly around the football. My man Ant Hill should have had a pick 6. Apparently, he told Trey Moore, who ruined it with a block in the back, hey, man, you owe me some money. Now, when Ant Hill was asked about it, you were there. He said, oh, no, it's all good. What'd he say?
In terms of biggest concern, Chip?
No, but what did Ant Hill say about Trey Moore, that block in the back, taking his pick 6 off the board?
Oh, if my memory serves correct, he said it was all good. Yeah, I remember
all good.
It was all good. Yeah, I remember Ant saying that. Oh man, yeah, we all good. He just gave him a hard time, and that was that. Oh, didn't he say? Gosh, I thought he said something else, but no, I remember him saying it's all good.
Yeah, and that his pelvic thrusts were inspired by SpongeBob.
SpongeBob, a very classic episode of SpongeBob, by the way, Chip.
Let's get that out there.
It's out there.
I mean, people are, wondering, wow, what's going on? Anthony Hill got a girlfriend he's trying to impress? No, SpongeBob.
Chip, two times a week, baby. 2 times a week you watch a SpongeBob. So what gets everyone has their own thing. What gets Ant Hill ready for game days? Little SpongeBob SquarePants.
SpongeBob SquarePants.
Guy.
Maybe the most violent player in college football.
That is hilarious.
That kind of chills to SpongeBob.
That is objectively, and I guess, really quick before you kind of touch on what concerns me. You gotta love that Chip, right? I mean, Ant Hill's someone who is such a force defensively, but just I don't want to call him a big goofball, but you see that big Kool-Aid smile on his face, and you gotta love that, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, you love that kid, and he's been giving props to all of his teammates. He's been telling us all along, Lianga Lafau's coming. Lianga Lafau's coming. He's shooting his shot. And so, yeah, good teammate. All right, back to what concerns you, Eric?
Yeah. Injuries. I could nitpick and say, certain things, but injuries. Quinn Ewers' health. I talked about the running backs, so I'm going to put that aside for a second. It's not just Quinn Ewers' injury history, which the last 4 seasons that he's played, and obviously didn't play at Ohio State, but going back to his junior year of high school, was injured.
Yeah, sports hernia. He had surgery in the middle of the season, came back early from the surgery to help lead his underdog team all the way to the state championship game. They were not favored that year. They were ranked number 21. They were favored to win it all the next year when he left to go to Ohio State. But yes, he did. He missed, I think, 6 games that year.
Chip, I can't emphasize this enough. This is a midsection injury in one that was non-contact, right?
Right. He was just kind of turning and throwing.
You know what Quinn Ewers is going to do a lot of? Turning and throwing, Chip. Turning in using, that torque, right? That's something that's
why Dak Prescott does that weird little warm-up where it looks like he's, trying to spin a hula hoop or something.
Hula hoop, a little salsa, a little right,
Salsa.
That's where that comes from. That's not something. It is not an ankle that you can say, okay, I can kind of nurse it or whatever. It's not. You can't hide that injury, so that concerns me. Again, it's not that Texas doesn't have a capable backup in Arch Manning, but this team is not going to win a national championship without Quinn Ewers. That's my perspective. You can argue with whoever else you want to argue with. I'm not debating that. So that is my biggest concern. If I had to pick one other, and this is very, 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 very nitpicky, it's pass rush, because they're getting an adequate pass rush. They're affecting quarterbacks, just not getting the sacks. And I only mention that because eventually, Chip, in the biggest of games, Georgia, SEC title game, college football playoff, pressure is great. And you can win a game by pressuring a quarterback. But you think in those biggest of contests, you're going to need some sacks. You're going to need a sack fumble, strip sack, things of that nature. So again, not even concern is too strong of a word. That's nitpicking. I just would like to see a little bit more of that, Chip, in my mind, and not those coverage sacks, those sacks that come because you're just whipping a man's tail on the offensive line.
Well, it's interesting because I agree with you. The injuries are a concern. And I do think that the fact that Quinn Ewers, he may be, I think I had a source tell me he was 70% last week. Maybe he's 80% this week. Maybe he's better than that. But you're still trying to get these running backs to pass protect and make sure that he's protected in this situation. So that is just a little thing that you put in the back of your mind. And then I agree with you on the pass rush. And you and I've been talking to you about, okay, when do we start to really drill down on what is, what the numbers show us and what is actually happening in terms of snaps? Because if you, let's go by the PFF numbers, just because they do give you a good snaps breakdown. The leading snap getter at defensive end is Trey Moore with 116 snaps. He has 4 quarterback pressures. Colton Vasek has 32 snaps he has 4 quarterback pressures. Ethan Burke has 79 snaps and has 4 quarterback pressures. The 2 leading defensive ends in terms of quarterback pressures are Colin Simmons, number 1, Baron Sorrell, number 2. Trey Moore, as I mentioned, 4 quarterback pressures, and he's got 2 guys who are getting half of his snaps who have 4 quarterback pressures as well. Ethan Burke has a pick 6. Colton Vasek has a couple sacks, so or at least 1, and some tackles for loss. So Trey Moore doesn't even have a tackle for loss at this point. Eric, at what point do we start to adjust the snaps? You mentioned it. I mean, Colin Simmons, guy's coming. He's going to be a monster. No one has his first step. I don't know that you need to sweat it against Mississippi State. They're probably going to try and run it a ton, but you want the young guy to be getting reps because he's showing you he can get there.
Chip, 2 things. One, listen to this podcast. I've been a big a big Trey Moore guy. Covered him, G5, UTSA, the whole 9. But, and I hate to, this early in the year with someone making that type of adjustment, start to say, oh, well, bench him. Where's that and the other?
Not bench.
You're saying adjust the snaps.
Adjust the snaps.
Good call out. Good call out. Because you're not saying bench. You're saying provide a few more snaps. That's a good call out. I apologize. At what point do we get there? Well, I think this is the week. You're heading into a crucial stretch of the season. As you talked about, Oklahoma, Georgia, probably going to be your toughest stretch. I don't think at that point, and Steve Sarkisian's a smart guy. PK is an excellent defensive coordinator. Also, PK coaches the edges, so take that for what it's worth. They'll know, hey, we're getting to the point in time which we need to, and if we're going to win these big time games, we got to make an adjustment. But I do think this is the week, Chip, that if you don't start seeing a little bit more, and also to be fair, we're not in practice. Some guys show some things in practice, and you're having some issues translating that to the game, and you want to give those guys room to coach them up, and if Trey Moore is showing something in practice, kind of find a way to get that out on Saturdays, right? But I think this is the week. This in conjunction with the bye week. If you're not getting it, you probably need to, as you said, and it's a good call out, adjust the snaps a little bit so that more, still part of that rotation, still playing plenty of snaps, but on those, we're seeing Simmons in that NASCAR package. Maybe you see a little bit more, Ethan Burke. Maybe you see a little bit more Colton Vasek, just in the sense that they can affect the game. Both those guys with their length, and you've talked about it. You've been huge on this for a while, how much they can affect the game with their length, getting in the passing lanes, making plays behind the line of scrimmage, et cetera, things of that nature. Even just with their length, turning, run plays a certain way or whatnot. That I think this is the week, Chip, in my mind, especially once you start getting in, like I said, a crucial part of your stretch in which that 6, 7, 8, 9 plays that maybe you're giving Trey Moore that you would give to some other guys could affect a game. I think this would be the week.
Yeah. And it did kind of even out a little bit in the ULM game. Trey Moore had, again, he had the most snaps of anyone at the defensive end position. Well, actually, he and Baron Sorrell both had 24 snaps. Ethan Burke had 20, and Colin Simmons had 20. And Justice Finkley had 9, and Colton Vasek had 6. And with those 6 snaps, Colton Vasek had a sack. I mean, Colton Vasek, the thing you love about that length that I've mentioned with Burke and Vasek is those guys are strong enough to long arm offensive tackles backward, which allows them to keep their eyes on the quarterback or the ball carrier. They're strong enough to shed and make the play. And that's just something in terms of edge setting in the run game, which we talked about ULM being a wide zone team, you got to have guys who can disrupt that, set that edge, totally, turn runs back inside. And I thought Texas did a good job with that. And maybe that's why we saw some additional snaps for Ethan Burke. But I think they could give even more snaps to Colton Vasek because he's playing such a physical brand of football. All right, good convo there. Let's talk a little bit about the rest of the SEC, Eric, because we're entering SEC play, and we had a big game last week with Tennessee going into Norman. Obviously, Texas, after the Mississippi State game, will have its first off week, and then we'll take on the Oklahoma Sooners. And Tennessee went into Norman and won by double digits. And Oklahoma's offense is a bit of a mess. Jackson Arnold gets benched. In comes Michael Hawkins. Hawkins looks pretty good. Hawkins runs around. Are you expecting to see Michael Hawkins as the quarterback of OU when the Sooners head to Dallas to get cozy with the number 1 ranked Longhorns at the Cotton Bowl?
I think you really got to consider it, Chip, in my mind, in terms of things have not been working. You kind of alluded to it, a little casually, but I think there's some merit to that, right? I mean, Seth Luttrell is not Jeff Lebby. It's not to say they're doing it's complete 180, but it's different. And when you go to, that's a very specific offense. When you go to a place and you commit to play for a specific coach, kind of scheme, it is different. And I don't think OU can afford to monkey around with Jackson Arnold and be a project, Chip. And here's why. This is not a first-year player. Despite what Brent Venables said, this is someone who you knew what you had him when you recruited. He's been in your program for a year. You've seen him practice. You had an entire spring. You had an entire fall. This isn't like, hey, we need to make adjustments here or there. You know what you have in him. And I'm not saying he's not a capable quarterback. I'm just saying just for the purposes of this year, you might not be able to afford to screw around with that anymore. And listen, Oklahoma's schedule doesn't get any easier for what Texas got in terms of the SEC schedule. Oklahoma got the exact opposite, right? So this thing can get off the rails really quickly, in my mind. So when you ask me, do I expect to see him? We're probably at a place where I think you can expect to see him. Now, the question is, he's going to be the starter, right? That's a legitimate question. So I guess I'm not ready to say yes just yet. I think we need to see another week and see if there's something else they can do. But Chip, and you've been around this game a long time, this could be a point where you start to worry about the kid's confidence in terms of Jackson Arnold. And to be fair to him, I've talked about this all offseason. I said it before, I'll say it again. You cannot portal an offensive line. The first team that's able to successfully portal an offensive line, then they'll prove me wrong. But especially at this level, you can kind of, even at the G5 level, you can kind of screw around and get a couple, G5 guys up front and say you want to increase your talent and whatnot. O-line is a cohesion thing, Chip. It is an experience thing. It is Jake Majors can look to his left and see Hayden Connor and look to, Hayden Connor can look to his left and see Kelvin Banks, and continuity. That matters. You can't just microwave that in an offseason. The receiver situation.
How hard Lane Kiffin tries, right?
Yeah. The receiver situation, that isn't necessarily what you would have liked it to be as well. So certainly a lot of factors outside of Jackson Arnold, but in specificities of the quarterback, I think it's something you absolutely have to entertain, Chip.
I'm hearing Michael Hawkins is going to start Saturday against Auburn. So that to me is kind of a no turning back moment. Look, you can massage it. It's all how the coach, Seth Luttrell is handling that and what message is being conveyed to Jackson Arnold. Hey man, we're going We're going to let you take a second, take a breath here. But look at two of Texas's biggest rivals who are still on the schedule, Oklahoma and A&M. Marcel Reed's playing pretty good football. And so A&M's running it pretty well. Marcel Reed ran for 90 yards last week. Colin Klein, we know his run offenses with dual threat quarterbacks. So just something to watch as Texas draws closer to these teams on the schedule. Obviously, OU coming up after the Mississippi State game. So I have to say I'm impressed with Tennessee. I'm impressed with their defense. Nico Iamaleava turned it over a couple times, but then Jackson Arnold turned it right back over to Tennessee. Had a chance to really capitalize, had a red zone turnover, and OU turned it right back over. So, Tennessee's defense, I think, is legit. And I mean, here's Texas tied for the number one scoring defense with Ole Miss at 5.5 points per game. Ole Miss is going to play Kentucky this week, Eric. Kentucky gave Georgia hell in Lexington, but this game will be in Oxford. You expect Kentucky's defense to be able to provide any resistance to Jackson Dart and the Ole Miss offense?
No, I don't. Quite frankly, just to put it point blank, Mississippi's offense is better than Georgia's at this point. That's not to say that Georgia's a bad offense or Georgia, may not kind of kick things into high gear throughout the rest of the year. But Jackson Dart, Lane Kiffin, that entire thing is cooking. It is humming. I do not expect Kentucky's defense to provide much resistance. I don't think, it's going to be something embarrassing in terms of them putting up 60, 70 points. But Jackson Dart, like I said, they have things rolling. I think they're going to get 400 plus yards total offense. I think they're going to put up 30-something points. I think they're going to win decisively, Chip.
Ole Miss is number one in scoring offense and tied for first with Texas in scoring defense.
Yep.
So they are filling up their confidence tank against a bunch of tomato cans. But here we go with SEC play. And Ole Miss, like we said, will at least go up against one of the more physical defenses this week in going up against Kentucky. And then when you look at the rest of the SEC, Eric, you've got OU at Auburn, we mentioned, Arkansas at A&M. And Arkansas they're doing some good things. I mean, they must wake up at night in a cold sweat at how they gave that game away against Oklahoma State. Arkansas, you could argue, should be 4-0. They had the game at Oklahoma State. They had to do 5 things wrong to lose it, and they did all 5 things. I think this game is going to be a thriller. I would take Arkansas to cover, if not pull the upset in College Station. You?
Well, Chip, remember, that game's on in College Station.
Isn't it? Haven't they moved it out of Jerry World? Or
did they move it out? There? Did they move it? I thought it was. We'll correct that here before we do this episode. I thought it was still in Arlington because that was the thing that really. I saw that game. The line is only 4 points, and that had me thinking. I mean, first off, everything.
Oh, it is in Arlington.
Yeah,
and it's still in Arlington.
Everything you said is true about Arkansas, and kind of how they performed to this point. But yeah, that is what is selling me on Arkansas. Is the fact that you go to Kyle Field. That's we all, or better than me, the type of atmosphere that is. But that's AT&T Stadium. I would be leaning very heavily towards the Razorbacks in my mind. The games I am super excited to see this weekend are that one, and of course the marquee matchup. I know we'll talk about before we do some take it or leave it. But yeah, Chip, that's what's selling me.
Yeah, Arkansas, Taylon Green. I mean, if you get good Taylon Green, you get really good Taylon Green. I mean, that guy has moxie, he's got swagger, he can run it, and he can get hot throwing it. And let's see if he can, get in sync with Bobby Petrino in the Road Rash offense, and see if they can get after A&M. And then obviously Georgia at Alabama. Georgia, a 1.5-point favorite. First time Alabama has been a home dog since 2007. Nick Saban's first year on the job in Tuscaloosa. I think this game is going to be another thriller. I think OU Auburn is going to be wild. I think Arkansas Texas A&M is going to be wild, and I think Georgia Bama is going to be wild.
Chip,
who are you liking that one?
This one, I mean, I am glad that it's the late game because I may invite myself over to the Brown estate to catch a little bit of that one. No, all jokes aside, I'm glad I'm going to be able to watch a lot of that game. I mean, I am pumped. I'm fired up for that one. I think that's a pick 'em. My brain tells me Georgia, but there's something about having to go into Alabama and win. And like you said, first time being a home dog in 17, 18 seasons. And Chip, I'm going to say this. I know Jalen Milroe is a lightning rod, and hell, he didn't have a great. We saw the mighty South Florida Bulls go into Tuscaloosa and push that team. That game was a lot closer than that final score will indicate, folks. If you didn't see that USF Alabama game, the final score was not indicative of what that game was for 3.5 quarters. But I like Jalen Milroe's makeup. I feel like he's a guy who rises to the occasion in big games. And right when you're ready to count him out, he shows up. So I'm going with Alabama in this one, Chip. And I feel so weird to say that because I think everyone's looking forward to the number 1 versus number 2 matchup of the idea of Georgia and Texas. But I don't know, man. There's just something about that game in Tuscaloosa that I'm leaning towards Crimson Tide.
Yeah, I am too, a little bit. And for the same reason. I think Jalen Milroe is a great competitor. And if you're going to get at Georgia, you want to get at that secondary. And Jalen Milroe, we know, throws a heck of a deep ball. And Ryan Williams, is there he and Ryan Wingo might be the 2 best freshman receivers going along with the kid at Ohio State. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. Fun week in the SEC as things really get cooking. All right, Eric, are you ready for some take it or leave it?
I'm ready, Chip.
All right, let's do it. All right, let's get to it. It is time for some take it or leave it. Eric, how are we doing in our standings? You had a good size lead.
I was leading 7-4, and now, drum roll, it is 8-5. Last week, the first question, when there were only 2 questions that we could score, because the third question was Colin Simmons will be in the starting lineup by the OU game. We'll have to come back to that come the OU game. The first question, Arch Manning would account for 6 total touchdowns. We both left that. The second question, Jarrett Gibson be Texas' first 100-yard rusher. Well, they got a 100-yard rusher. It just wasn't Jarrett Gibson. It was Jaden Blue. We both took that, and we both were wrong. So I am still ahead. It is 8-5, Chip.
8-5. All right. Well, let's get after it then. Take it or leave it. Number 1 this week. Texas will score 60 points for the first time this season against Mississippi State. Take it or leave it.
I am leaving it, Chip. I know Mississippi State, they're struggling. But I do not see Texas reaching 60 against an SEC opponent. And here's also the thing, Chip. Yes, I think if Texas were going to reach 60, they would have done it in non-conference play, specifically against the group of fives. I got to go back and look how many times Steve Sarkisian has, as a head coach, has scored 60 points, because he's very much a respect the game guy. Like he gets his guys, once the game is out of reach, he gets the backups in the game and he allows for them to do things, but he's not necessarily calling downfield shot for things of that nature. So that's why I if Texas is going to score 60, they're going to have to get some defensive touchdowns, Chip. So I'm leaving it. What says you?
I see defensive touchdowns happening.
There you go.
Should have been one last week. My man Ant Hill.
True.
Yeah, I'm trailing, so I need to get some points here. My man Eric is leaving it, so I'm gonna take it. I need some defensive touchdowns. Jade and Colin and Ant Hill and anyone else who's willing to help. And now I feel bad because I meant to bring up you asked Steve Sarkisian about Jade Barron and the move to the cornerback position. Tell everyone, because that was a big move to move him from star nickel out to corner and really to the boundary side.
Yes, I'll do it super quick. We can elaborate a little bit later. I thought Steve Sarkisian's answer was revealing in terms of, like you said, the idea, the thinking in the offseason was, hey, if we keep Jade at star, you have two of your better players on defense. One of them is going to be standing next to you. And he said, if they go base package, which obviously there were some teams this year, especially in the SEC, that you may play a little more base. Both of them are on the sideline, right? You're in that base being a 4-3 look. So that was played into the part of the decision to move Jade outside. And also getting, Jade, like you said, that boundary corner spot is one that you get a little more action, the run side, and play in the run fit. And Jade can do that real well. Ryan Watts, we know if there's one thing about Ryan Watts that he did well, physical presence, he wasn't afraid to come up and tackle last year. So we'll just quick answer that. I'll elaborate more in 4 downs, and we'll elaborate more certainly in future flagship podcast, Chip.
Okay. Take it or leave it, number 2.
Take it or leave it, number 2. Quinn Ewers will start against Mississippi State on Saturday. Take it or leave it. I think I'm going to leave this. I think Steve Sarkisian, and again, I don't know what kind of a healer Quinn Ewers is. He could be healing up right now as we speak, feeling 100 come Thursday, Friday, Saturday. But it just makes too much sense to let him have an extra week of rest going into that gauntlet of OU Georgia. So I am going to leave this. Eric, what say you? I am going to leave it as well. Not just because Chip left it, but because of everything I've alluded to. If he's not 100%, there's no reason to put him out there this week against Mississippi State, given the type of injury it is. No reason you can't build a game plan around Arch Manning and leave Saturday's game with a victory, Chip.
Yeah. All right. Take it or leave it. Number 3.
That's you.
Oh, that's me.
Yeah.
You still think Quinn Ewers will break Colt McCoy's single season touchdown passes record of 34? Take it or leave it.
Well, Chip, here's the thing. Let's say Quinn doesn't start this game Saturday. That means Texas will be 5 games into the regular season with 7 games remaining. And as we've emphasized, this is a single season record. This is not a regular season record. So there's 7, possibly of 7 more regular season games, an SEC title game, then a college football playoff. Quinn already has 8 TDs. You're telling me that Quinn in, let's just say, at least 9 games can't get 27 more touchdowns? 8, so you need 27. Yeah, I'm not a math major. He would need 27 more touchdowns.
27.
Yep. In 9 games? Yeah. At bare minimum? Yeah, I think so.
That would be 3 touchdown passes per game.
Per game, correct.
So you're taking it.
Sorry, yes, I am taking it, Chip.
Yes, I am too. Here's the deal. If you look at the past defenses remaining on Texas's schedule, let me just give you a little look-see here, because it seems that the remaining teams on Texas's schedule are uniquely unqualified to defend the pass. Mississippi State is 10th in the conference in pass defense. Vanderbilt is 12th. Florida is 14th, and Arkansas is 16th. Mississippi State and Vanderbilt have both given up 7 touchdown passes, the most in the SEC this season. Florida has given up 6, so has Arkansas given up 6. OU's given up 4, and Kentucky's given up 2. But it's a little soft in the pass defense down the stretch for the Longhorns. So I am going to take this. That means we agree on 2 and disagree on 1.
Yep.
I need some defensive touchdowns on Saturday night. All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Flagship Podcast. Before we sign off, make sure you like and subscribe to Horns 24/7 YouTube channel, please. And if you're not an annual member of horns247.com, what are you doing? It's the first season in the SEC, and Texas is the #1 team in the country for the first time since 2008. And we're writing story after story after story about these Longhorns and putting out great content like the Stampede every Monday on every bit of recruiting intel. Eric's and my Take 2 column on Tuesdays. Eric's 4 Downs column. We need to get off this podcast so we can go finish up his 4 Downs column. The Insider on Thursday mornings. The Roundtable on Sunday nights. Come on. It's going to cost you $6 a month to go take that. You got to become an annual member so you get all the VIP access to all the team sites on the preeminent 24/7 sports network. But now is the time before the gauntlet, OU Georgia gauntlet. All right. And if you want to give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcast, that'd be great too. We'd appreciate it. Not asking for too much. All right. For Eric Henry, I am Chip Brown. Till next time, we'll see you over at horns247.com. Stay safe and keep the faith.